Dave, I want to thank you for a lot of things. For the remarks you made today, I agree with, not so shockingly, I agree with most of what you said, but I especially want to thank you for all the slides that you've given me that I use in my energy macroeconomics class at TCU. I'd say 90% of the material I teach comes from TPH, so thanks for that. So you'll notice that there's no company affiliation on this slide, and I put that in there deliberately because none of the organizations with whom I'm affiliated have reviewed or endorsed in any way my remarks today. They're mine, so if you hate them, hate me. Don't hate the people that I work with. I've got about 20 slides to cover in 10 minutes, so fasten your seatbelt. So what I'm going to try and do, overview of what I'm going to try and do today is convince you that the shale plays that Dave referred to are secular, not cyclical, that the economic impact is huge, and that they will last a generation or longer. So thanks God for George Mitchell. George Mitchell built a gas plant in Bridgeport, Texas, and he couldn't fill it up. So he kept drilling in the Barnett, and he kept drilling in the Barnett, and he kept drilling in the Barnett. And eventually technology caught up to the Barnett, and the Barnett became a major producing gas basin. And after the Barnett, we found the Haynesville and the Fayetteville and Marcellus, and then the oily shales started to come into play, and we had the Eagle Ford, and we had the Bakken, and now we've got the Permian. And the economic impact depends on which economist you ask, on the order of $500 billion annually, or maybe $700 billion annually. The last estimate I saw was that it contributed 3.5% to US GDP. If we didn't have 3.5% in US GDP, we'd have a negative growth in the United States. We'd be Europe. So without low-cost energy, we'd be Europe. Think of that. And the secret sauce that made all of that happen is big fracks on big horizontals, and they produce big wells out of what, when I was a young drilling engineer for Shell, used to be called source rock. Couldn't possibly produce anything, but now it's great reservoir rock. And I got this slide from my good friend Greg Lanham, who's the CEO at FTS International and also a neighbor of mine in Fort Worth. So let's dial back the clock a little bit to 2005, and I think Dave showed you a picture of 2005. But if you look at this graph in 2005, the US is producing 50 billion cubic feet of gas a day. We're importing 10 billion cubic feet of gas from Canada. The market is undersupplied. The price of gas is $12. The shale plays start kicking in, and by 2013, with the addition of the Barnett, the Haynesville, the Fayetteville, the Marcellus, and all the associated gas from the oily plays, we're producing 70 billion cubic feet of gas a day, and the market is oversupplied. And the price in the first quarter of 2012 was $1.91, and the average for 2012 was $2.40. That's terrible news if you're a gas producer, but it's fantastic news if you're a consumer. Let me show you some of the benefits that happened in the consumer market. As Dave mentioned earlier, electric power prices are essentially denominated in terms of the price of natural gas. And this slide shows in blue wholesale US electric power prices, and in red the price of natural gas. So in 2008, for example, the average price of natural gas was $8 a thousand cubic feet. The average price for wholesale electric power was $68 a megawatt hour. By 2012, the average price of electricity was $28 per megawatt hour because natural gas was $2.40. That's a $40 per megawatt hour difference on a 4 billion megawatt hour annual market. So that's a $160 billion benefit that accrued somewhere to the American consumer. My electric power prices went from 13.5 cents in 2008 to 5.2 cents per kilowatt hour in 2012. In addition to the benefits in the electric power market, the direct benefit of having lower priced gas in the residential, commercial, and industrial market was a $90 billion benefit. So order of magnitude $250 billion worth of annual benefit to the American consumer. And the natural gas resource is large. MIT and the National Petroleum Council published this study in September of 2011 that suggests that the natural gas resource, and this is resource, not reserve, but if we can convert resource to reserves, we might have 100 or 150 year supply of natural gas in this country. That's huge, much bigger than we ever anticipated. We have lots of gas. Better news, we've got lots of gas that's going to be cheap for a long time. If you look at the curve on the slides, if you look at the green curve, and you look at that band is low demand and the high demand case for the next 25 years. According to the MIT NPC model, we can produce all the gas we need for the next 25 years at a cost somewhere between $5 and $7 using present technology and a present resource base. But if the resource base is larger and the technology gets better, this study suggests that we can produce that gas for between $3 and $4 a thousand cubic feet. And just to put that in perspective, every barrel of imported crude oil costs us the equivalent of $18 per thousand cubic feet. So all of this gas is available to us at a cost that's 75% less than the imported crude oil that we deliver to our doorstep every day. The IEA agrees. The IEA, in their 2013 World Energy Outlook report, says that we have a structural, long-term competitive advantage in gas and electricity. In 2035, gas in the United States will cost half of what it costs in Europe and half of what it costs in Asia. Electricity is the same. Half of what it costs in Europe, half of what it costs in Asia. Long-term structural competitive advantage that accrues to our economy because of natural gas. Even better news, it's environmentally friendly. When you burn gas in a power plant, it produces, on a life cycle analysis, 50% fewer greenhouse gas emissions than a modern plant and 60% fewer greenhouse gas emissions than an older 12,500 BTU heat rate plant. So let me switch my thinking to oil. Conventional wisdom 10 or 15 years ago was that we had peaked in oil production. Hubbard's peak theory was published in 1956, said that we were going to peak in oil production in this country in 1970, and essentially that was right. From 1970 to 2008, we declined in production every single year. And then the shale transformation happened. And so as Dave showed in his slide earlier, total oil production in this country went from 5 million barrels a day in 2008 to 8 million barrels a day at the end of last year, an increase of 60% in only 6 years. Even better news is that our import bill keeps going down because of increased domestic production, but also decreased consumption because oil prices were higher, so we consumed less. Overall, imports went from 13 million barrels a day to 7 million barrels a day over a 5 or 6 year period of time. And guess what's happening on the other side of the world? That economy that we compete with, China imported almost no oil in the mid-1990s. Their import bill is 6 million barrels a day. Their trajectory is doing this, and our trajectory is doing that. Good news for us and our economy. Lots of people recognize this. Just a couple of sound bites here. Jeff Immel, smart guy, says that we're going to create 3.9 million new jobs. I mean, how many is the rest of the economy producing? Virtually none. Okay, we're producing all the jobs. $533 billion impact to GDP. CEO of ConocoPhillips, Ryan Lance, says we're in the first inning of a 9-inning game. Citigroup says this is the beginning of a new American gas century. In fact, their estimate is that the impact on GDP could be as high as $675 billion annually. And the IEA says that we're entering a golden age of gas. So I have a couple of random thoughts. This is my favorite hydraulically fractured gas field. This happens to be my home course in Fort Worth. This is the Colonial Country Club. That is Jason Duffner and Zach Johnson on the tee on number 13. That's 2012, the year that Zach won his second Colonial plaid jacket. Anybody who doesn't believe that this industry can produce gas in an environmentally sensitive way, I've got a ticket for you to Colonial. Come on Sunday. Walk around that course and tell me that that isn't pristine. You know, not everybody believes that. The French, for example, don't believe that you should be fracking, and fracking is banned in France. But when I was in London recently, I was in the tube station, so apparently this is an Anglo-Saxon thing. Fracking is a good solution to our energy problem. So it works in the UK and it works here. It might actually work everywhere. One of the things that always frustrates me is to see people protesting about our industry. They got a picket sign in this hand, they got a cup of caramel macchiato in this hand. Well, I know how much value a gallon of gasoline brings to this economy. I'm not sure at $36.80 a gallon how much a gallon of caramel macchiato does. There's lots of good things happening in this industry, and we need people. There's a critical shortage of human capital coming. Anybody who wants to get an MBA at TCU, come and talk to me afterwards. We've got an energy MBA program. Got to put out a little commercial there for my academic institution. But you can see this is the age distribution in the Society of Petroleum Engineers. The median age is around 53. So people are coming out of this industry. We need young, smart people to come into this industry. Send them our way. A couple of random thoughts before I close. Oil's hard to find and expensive to produce. If we don't produce oil from shales, it's going to be deep water in a country like Angola or Nigeria with country risk. It's a $60, $80, $100 a barrel proposition. So oil's going to be expensive for a long time. Gas is a screaming long-term buy at $5. It's much cheaper than oil, and it's going to remain cheaper than oil for a long time. Gas demand is going to increase in this country and around the world. CNG and LNG will displace gasoline and diesel. We consume in the transportation market about 12 million barrels a day of gasoline and diesel. If through improved CAFE standards and substitution of CNG and LNG, we drop that from 12 million barrels a day of consumption to 6 million barrels a day of consumption, that 7 million barrels of imports become 1 million barrel of imports. We're energy independent at that point in time. There's good news coming. It's coming because of shales. Wind, solar, ethanol will never pass the economic sniff test in my lifetime. And we've created millions of jobs. And then just to conclude, I don't know what the impact is on GDP. I'd like to predict it 25 years from now so nobody can come back and check my math. But it's probably $500 or $700 billion or something like that. We have a structurally competitive advantage that will last a long, long time in the gas and electricity markets. Energy security in the crude oil market has been improved because of the increased domestic production. Oil remains scarce, and no matter what the reason is, we should use less because it's scarce and it's expensive. And our industry does a lousy job of self-promotion. But thanks God for the shales, because of the shales, my 7 grandsons have an energy secure future. Thank you very much.